Hey guys, what's up? It's Hail Zeon, and this is the Master Debaters, where we, and by we I mean myself and a guest, will debate a topic, and this topic is going to be about Frieza. Is he a great villain? Is he a terrible villain? Is he somewhere in the middle? And for this video, I feel there's no other person I'd rather debate on this than a man who has literally made Frieza his own, avatar. Mr. Geekdom 101. Say hello.
Yes, my first time ever on your channel. You've done 15 videos on mine, but this is the first time that I'm gracing the presence of Zeon's shitty vlog channel. Unless this is going to be on the good channel.
No, this is going to be on the shitty vlog channel.
Okay, good. Because I surround myself with shit, and this is how it should be.
All right. So yeah, Frieza. One of the most popular villains in Dragon Ball. I don't really see the hype and love for this character, and clearly you do. So
I do.
Yeah, you're clearly a Frieza fan. So I'm just going to go ahead and give it over to you first. Go ahead and state your case for why you think Frieza's so great, and then whenever you're done, I'll make my case, and we'll just go back and forth and have a dialogue.
Yeah. Now, obviously, before we go any further, I just want to say that this is going to be within the confines of Dragon Ball. I am in no way going to sit here and tell you that Frieza is a comparable villain to, I don't know, the villain from D2 The Mighty Ducks, because that's the biggest dick in the world, bro. That Icelandic coach from Mighty Ducks 2, he's the real worst douchebag of any movie, alright?
Okay, no. Okay, did you see Karate Kid 3?
That's another guy who's a dick. Actually, the guy from Karate Kid 1 is pretty bad, too. What about Snyder from Three Ninjas?
Oh, God. Just digging into the 90s. Just see what we can find.
Yeah, those are the real villains, right? But no, within the confines of Dragon Ball, I really like Frieza as a villain because Frieza, when Toriyama came up with Frieza, he created this, retcon, that's what it was, a backstory where we saw kind of, he added layers to the lore of not just Goku, but Goku's heritage, which we heard a little bit about with Vegeta. And, of course, it is a retcon. It wasn't planned from the beginning. Don't let anybody fool you. But, obviously, there's problems with the Frieza arc, and there's a lot of problems with Resurrection F. But that's not what we're talking about here. The character of Frieza. I like the idea. I've always liked the idea of a space Nazi overlord being a villain. I like the Emperor from Star Wars, I like Thanos, and I think they're similar to Frieza, in that Frieza is this, and again, a lot of things about Frieza you have to read between the lines. It's not outwardly stated. You have to really understand the character. I like the fact that he is this, dictator who's power hungry, even though he's supposedly really powerful, but still wants immortality. I like the fact that he is immature, selfish. You can tell he's never really dealt with any real adversity in his whole life until, of course, he meets Goku. You can tell that he doesn't think he ever will because he never trained, which is, again, the Toriyama thing. And the fact that he is so superstitious. It's like he gives off this visage. And, of course, this is mostly in the Japanese version. So if you grew up with the Linda Young Frieza, it's not the same. It's just not, doesn't really hit the beats like Chris Ayers and Ryusei Nakao did. But I like the fact that he's very polite. He comes off very non-threatening while still coming off threatening. He tries to come off non-threatening, but people see through his bullshit, which I love. I love that about the character. And the fact that he tries to keep his cool, but he has a short fuse, I like that as well. And just the fact that he, despite being so powerful, is still very paranoid about the science, about the entire race, to where initially he's paranoid that if they gang up on him, he could end up being overthrown, but also the fact that, the superstition of the legendary warrior is also in the back of his head, and he tries to forget about it, but he never really can. I really like that about the character. And I think a lot of it does have to do with Ryusei Nakao's performance. Obviously, I love the manga, but I prefer to watch the anime because of how well he created that character. And that's kind of my thought. That's why I think he's my favorite villain, because he's just, he's encompasses everything that a villain is. And he doesn't care about killing people. He doesn't care about... He's just a ruthless dick, and he chooses to be evil. He doesn't have to be evil. He chooses to be evil, whereas other villains like Piccolo and like Boo are inherently created to be destructive forces. Frieza gets pleasure out of it. He destroys, he genocides, the entire planet Vegeta, and he gets joy out of it. Just a real dickhead, and that's why I like
Okay. And I mean, that's pretty much what I figure like a lot of people see in Frieza is like that kind of, he is kind of charismatic, he's really intimidating, he's really powerful, he's this kind of galactic overlord. But like my issues with the character is like, first off, he really lacks motivations for like why he is as fucked up as he is. Like, he is this malicious monster. He is just basically evil for evil's sake. And I always feel that those kind of villains are they're like the easiest to pretty much just come up with. Like, oh, he's this evil galactic Nazi. It's like, well, why? It's like, well, fuck it, because he's a Nazi. Why do you need a reason for him to be a space Nazi? He just is. He's this malicious monster. And I always feel like that's kind of a sign of weak writing. Also, like, Frieza kind of became the template for other villains later on for, that whole kind of, he's really, full of himself. He's really kind of, he has that bit of a charismatic thing. He's feels all powerful. And then as soon as the tables turn on him, he completely loses his shit. He throws temper tantrums. We saw this also with Cell.
But that's very realistic. That's so accurate.
I mean, it is, sometimes. But then that, like, he just becomes, like, the template for, like, all the other villains. Because, like, Cell does the exact same thing. Super Boo does the exact same thing. So it just kind of, it starts feeling less like an interesting character thing. And Vegeta actually does the same thing, where Vegeta is overly confident. And he just feels like another villain in that line of super full of themselves until they get put in their place, and then they lose their shit. And, like, thinking about, like, Frieza in the greater context of Dragon Ball, how, like, oh, like, he wiped out the Saiyan race and all that, and even that I feel like is diminished because in Dragon Ball Super, you know what I'm bringing up, Beers.
I hate it. Yeah,
Beers completely just steals Frieza's, like, big character moment. One of his most defining elements of his character has been completely undermined because now it was no longer Frieza's decision to do so, but something he was directly ordered to do by Beers himself. So, that's another issue.
Yeah, but I like to think of it, I am interrupted, but I like to think of it more as like he was already planning to do it, and Beerus was just kind of giving him that last little oomph to do it. I think he was already, because you can't erase his paranoia. His paranoia is there, it's just been minimized.
Right, and I mean, I'll definitely agree with that. Like, like they definitely had that as part of his character, but the mere fact that, like, now that's just, it wasn't something that he actively chose to do. It was something that he had been commanded to do. So, like, would he always have done it? Or would he have let the Saiyan race live on had it not been for Beers? And he just kind of, like, keeps an eye on them a little bit. Like, you never... Like, now it just kind of calls into question a lot of Frieza's character. And then also there's, like, pretty much after Frieza's big arc, his big introductory arc, Frieza then becomes kind of a joke. Like, his big return after the Frieza arc, he comes in for the artificial human arc at the very beginning, and he gets split in two like a chump. And he becomes a joke villain at that point. The filler, when he shows up for at the beginning of the Otherworld tournament, he gets completely just raffle stomped. When he shows up in movie 12, he gets one-shotted by Gohan. Even in Resurrection F, his big return to glory, his big overhyped moment was just, like, it was nothing. He just shows up after training, he gets a new form, he gets his ass kicked, and he dies. Like, he does nothing significant or important, and I feel like he is a character much like Broly, where, like, his myth, the legend that is Frieza, is grander than the character himself.
Well, I will say this. I do completely agree with you about the fact that the modern Dragon Ball has diminished the impact of Frieza. completely. Like Super and Resurrection F. Resurrection F is one of the most poorly written movies that I've ever seen. Sorry if you're a fan of that movie. I mean, you can be a fan of the cool fights.
And this man saw Batman v Superman.
I mean, I'm not even going to compare those two, but let's just say I had more fun in the theater watching Resurrection F. But I was with Lance, so I mean, obviously there's going to be lots of fun to be had there. But no, the thing is, I will agree with you that he has become a joke. That Resurrection F, the way that he was written in that movie, he literally learned nothing from his previous battle with Goku. He just, hey, I can get stronger, and then he doesn't even understand why that's so important for him to figure things out. Like, just, it really did, hurt him. Same thing with what Beerus said about him, and the fact that he's in the film, in Resurrection F, one of the key scenes that pisses me off is when he looks at Beerus and he's like, "Oh my Beerus-sama!" and he becomes a huge pussy. Like, that scene right there, and this is a discussion for another day, right? But that scene right there has been one of the major problems with Dragon Ball Super from day one, is this constant reliance on gods and making friends with the gods to where there's no drama if you've always got the gods there to give you backup. And it was fine at first. It's cool to do it once or twice, but it's become this thing now where Beerus is now a part of the main cast, and he is hurting. I feel, and some people are going to disagree with me, I love Beerus as a character, but he is hurting what's the word I'm looking for? What do you call it, like dread? Like that feeling of dread?
He ruins the tension.
He's ruining the tension of any fight because he's always there. And just Frieza's diminished like fucking Resurrection F. The original manga version of Frieza from the original 42 volumes is a much better character, I think. One thing I will counter to your point is you said that he has no real motivation. Now, the paranoia is his motivation. That I feel that's his motivation, I think, because he was listening to the fight between between Vegeta and Nappa and those guys, so he knows, he already has this, I guess, subconscious fear of that race. And again, this is a tiny bit of headcanon, but my guess is that he wanted to become an immortal to 100% secure, that he will never be overthrown. Now, some people have said that he wanted to become an immortal to challenge Beerus. That's never actually stated, so we cannot. That's super headcanon-y. But it's possible. It's possible. We never hear it. But I think that the difference between him and like Cell and Boo, because you're right, they all have that trope where they're big, cocky, and then they back down. But even like you said, Vegeta had that problem. That's like nothing new. But the fact that with Frieza, it's similar, but with Frieza, I think that the reason why he's motivated to be a dick is because he comes off like a guy who was handed everything his entire life. He never had to work for anything. He's just basically what he is, bro. This is what he is. He's basically like a kid who got handed $1 million or whatever, $1 billion from his dad, and is above the law. Like, he's basically like the president's son or whatever. Like, he can do whatever the fuck he wants and get away with it. And I think that's what makes that character more interesting, is that he can do whatever he wants and get away with it, and he's super spoiled. And I think that's his motivation, that he feels like anything that's not him is beneath him. You see him with his racism towards the Saiyans, his hatred towards his own minions, he kills them. Anything beneath him is, nothing. He's an aristocratic jackass, and I think he's a reflection of a lot of people in the world who think their shit doesn't stink, and I like that about that character. I think the difference between him and Cell and Boo is that he has a whole history of being like this. Cell was created in a laboratory, but he also has Frieza's genes. Boo is fucking a bunch of shit. Frieza, I think, has a whole lifetime of being this way. That makes sense?
Yeah, and honestly, like, I do like your little bit of headcanon there, that, like, that knowing that, oh shit, the Saiyans are rising in power and becoming more deadly, like, that acts as a motivator for him. I never really considered it like that, and it's actually, like unlike most bullshit...
It fits.
Yeah, unlike most bullshit headcanons, it actually kind of falls in line with what we know and what's been established. And that is cool, kind of a cool way to interpret Frieza. But at the same time, though, the mere fact that he is this character with all this potential history, and the fact that just nothing, we don't even really scratch the surface.
I agree.
Of what Frieza is. I mean, we just know that like he is just this all-powerful dude. You know, he is the big boss fight. He's the big boss fight at the end of the arc. Like, as far as I'm concerned, like, you know, his connection to Goku's race is really kind of irrelevant in the greater scheme of the storyline, because to Goku it's completely irrelevant. He doesn't give a shit that this is the guy who wiped out his planet. Goku has no personal attachment to his race.
That's right.
And a lot of people always like to bring up, like, oh, like, you know, Frieza, like the person who wiped out Goku's race. This is like Goku, like, you know, avenging his people. And Goku doesn't give a fuck about his people. His people are on Earth. Those are his people.
Yeah, if anything, Goku is avenging everyone. Because if you notice that speech when he gives Frieza, he talks about the Namekians too, how he killed them. It's not that he's killing the Saiyans, that he's just a killer. That he doesn't think that Frieza should kill innocent people. You know what I mean?
Right, and then Goku, the dumbest fuck on the planet in the fucking multiverse now, just like gives his power to Frieza. It's like, don't do bad things anymore, okay?
Yeah, but then Frieza, the dumbass that he is, tries to kill him when she should have just freaking retreated, right, and come back to live another day, fight another day. But he's an idiot too, and everybody in Dragon Ball is stupid.
Yeah, I will say that moment where Goku's flying away and he has that kind of psychological break of just not being able to deal with failure, and actually still tries to take a shot at Goku, even though he's like literally half the man he was at the beginning of that fight. Like, that is a really interesting character moment, because like he'd rather just be blown to fucking pieces than just let his opponent fly away. So, I mean...
Well, it's not even that. I'm going to add a layer to it, right? It's more than that. And that's why I love that scene, even though it's dumb, because he's sitting there in his head. He's never been challenged before in his entire life. He's never been beaten to a pulp. He's never been cut in half, obviously. He's sitting there trying to logically come to terms with the fact that Goku is stronger than him. He cannot come to terms with this. He's sitting there. It's like when you're married for 30 years and you get a divorce. Like, I know people who will sit there and not understand it for years. This is what's happening to Frieza right now. He cannot comprehend in his brain this actually happened. Combine that with his racism towards the freaking Saiyans, with his, constant, silver spoon up his ass, his whole fucking life. He knows he can't beat Goku. Him shooting that blast at Goku has absolutely no rational thought. That's like if I go up to, I don't know, freaking Cain Velasquez and I punch him in the face and expect not to get my ass whipped. Like, he knows deep down inside that blast ain't gonna work, but it's not registering in his head. Goku supremely defeated him, and he cannot come to terms with it, and that's amazing to me. But because it's so like. It's not that realistic, but it is a human emotion. It is something that we, as people, go through sometimes.
Right. And yeah, like that is like, like I said, like that is one of those very few Frieza moments where I think he stands out as a character. Beyond that, though, he just feels like I said, like, he is like, this space gangster. Like, he's like space Tony Montana, like a space Hitler. He is just, everyone fears him. He always acts, very kind of aloof and confident. And I feel like that's not necessarily like that, like, interesting or unique of a character trait. For Dragon Ball, and once again, like, I am kind of, because you were keeping your argument strictly to Dragon Ball, but like, as soon as you pull Frieza out of Dragon Ball and compare him just in the greater mythos of villains and writing and literature and film, Frieza looks like a far less interesting character by comparison, even though, like, even within the confines of Dragon Ball, like, you look at Daimao, the literal, like, evil that has been split from God, that has now ravaged Earth, the planet that God was intended to protect, and, he is literally just turning, against God to slaughter the people that God is there to protect. like almost pretty much like an act of defiance of his own creation. Like that to me seems like a far more interesting character. And even like, you know, whenever his children die, like when Daimyo's children die, he feels it. And he feels upset, like, you know, like someone actually killed, like a father actually,
that's right.
a father actually mourning his sons, and like that's a dynamic that you never get with Frieza. You know, you kill off Frieza's father, he doesn't give a shit. You know, you kill off anyone that Frieza knows, he doesn't care. He's just, you know, he's just the ultimate bad guy. And
well, what it is that he's so caught up in himself. He is such a narcissist. I mean, Cell is probably more of a narcissist because his whole thing was testing out his body. But Frieza is so full of himself that nothing else matters. Like if you have a pyramid, right? In psychology, we have the Abraham Maslow hierarchy of needs.
Right.
If you were to flip that for Frieza, the top of the pyramid be me, and everything else would be below it. Like, all he cares about is himself. He is the ultimate selfish prick, which, again, I think that makes him far more interesting than Daimyo, because even though you make good points about Daimyo having a different layer to his character, I think the fact that Frieza is so caught up in himself that he has he basically has, this is going to sound weird, but just follow me on this one. He's basically a sociopath. He has a combination of narcissistic and sociopathic tendencies. He has narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, which means that he has no conscience. He has no conscience. And to me,
right,
on one sense, yes, I do agree with you that Piccolo has different layers of that, but on the other sense, when you study Frieza, there are people in this world, and it's hard for me to come to terms with this, because I feel like I have a conscience somewhere in there, but there are people in the world who do things and don't care about anything else. And that's how Frieza is. And to me, that's fascinating to me. But I do agree with you in that I don't think Frieza really... There are other villains in fiction who are way more complex than Frieza. Magneto, for one. I think he's got a great backstory.
Oh, yeah.
But I think he's a great example. But with Frieza, I think because of his ties to Goku and Vegeta, who's also a fan favorite... I think that is what makes him so memorable, that he has actual backstory ties. Goku has no ties with freaking Daimyo or Tao Pai Pai or any of that shit, or even Cell or Boo, but Frieza does have a tie with him.
Well, I mean, Frieza had a tie with Goku in the fact that he slaughtered his race, but once again, like I said, Goku mentally is completely divorced from this idea. He doesn't, like I said, he doesn't think about like what his real parents were like, or what, like, you know, even though, you know, according to Dragon Ball Minus, they were basically fucking Jarrell, you know, like these loving parents that sent him off to be saved and be a hero.
Remember, the post Battle of God shit can fuck off. We're talking about the original manga, but okay, you're right, it sucks.
Yeah, but I don't
like the Dragon Ball Minus.
Right, nobody really likes Dragon Ball Minus, and even if they say they like Dragon Ball Minus, they're probably lying. So, yeah, it's just, you know, like I say, Goku feels completely divorced from that whole thing. Like, yes, he has a tie to Goku's backstory, but at the same time, like, Baby has, like, ties to Goku's history, but...
I love Baby as a villain.
Yeah,
but you're gonna get the fucking people, but that's GT! No, Baby's a pretty good villain.
Baby's a great villain, especially as far as Dragon Ball villains are concerned. Baby's a great villain. And honestly, you know, and I'm gonna... you know, once again, you know, bring something from Super, you know, as a positive of a good villain in Dragon Ball, Goku Black. His fucking origin story is a clusterfuck. It doesn't make any goddamn sense, but, like, his philosophy, his ideologies, his passion and drive, and the things that move him to take the actions that he does, like, that, like, you know, that is a person with direct ties to Goku, that, like, you know, directly affects Goku, and Goku has, like, you know, like, personal beef with, especially whenever Goku finds out that, oh, in another timeline, this motherfucker slaughtered my family. You know,
yeah.
And so, you know, as far as, like, you know, villains that have ties to our hero, you know, there are other villains who also have those ties. In Goku's Black, he has a much stronger tie, because he's literally fucking Goku. I would say Baby's ties,
what about Broly?
And there's a good example of how having ties to Goku doesn't make a character good, and isn't a positive example.
I agree. Now, I will say this. All right, so Frieza's character, Toriyama was quoted as saying something like, he's based on what he called the worst kind of people, which is people who are brokers that pretty much forcibly take it, or whatever. My thing that's weird about Frieza, this is something I never understood, which I guess would be a negative, is he's so powerful physically. I don't understand why he would even broker planets and resell. Like, who does he actually sell these planets to? Like, I never...
Yeah, like, that's something I wanted to bring up.
That I never understood.
Yeah, because, like, his whole concept, like, the fact that he is a planet broker, the fact that he is, like, he wipes out the life on planets, and, like, who the fuck is he selling these things to? Who the fuck buys them from him? Who the fuck would even trust Frieza to not go and then wipe out their planet so he could sell it to the next highest bidder? Like, the whole concept of Frieza and his business makes no fucking sense. Like, now, if he wasn't, like, a planet broker, if he was just, like this galactic emperor, just, Genghis Khanning his way through the different, like, solar systems, taking over planets just because he wants more and more territory and to rule over everything, that would make more sense. But even, like, the core idea of his business doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, he doesn't need to even have that business if he's so, like, what is his ultimate goal? Like, he just wants to keep being rich. I mean, why would you care about being rich why would you care about being rich if you've got the ability to blow anything up you want? That's what I never understood. But again, that's just something that it's a flaw. That is a flaw in Frieza's character,
right?
Or at least in the backstory. I feel like there probably is an explanation, but Toriyama's probably...
But only Toriyama knows it, and no one's asked him in an interview yet.
And if they do, he's gonna bullshit his way around it.
Right. So yeah, I mean? Like, I guess, like, my final thoughts on Frieza is just, like, all the things I've said, like, you did bring up some interesting points, and it does make me view Frieza in a slightly more positive light than I did, but I feel overall, like, like, the mere fact that he is pedestalized as the best villain in the franchise, I feel like it's only because, especially in the States, because we kept seeing the Frieza arc over and over and over again for so fucking long. It took us forever to get new episodes. That's one factor. Also, the fact that, like, that arc is just so incredibly long. So we spent all this time with him.
Well, we talked about that earlier. I don't know if I want to talk about the actual arc itself, because the arc does have problems.
Right, but I feel like because...
There are a lot of issues.
But I feel like because, one, Frieza has this ties to Goku's, lineage, his whole history, and the fact that, like, the Frieza fight itself is, like, 30 fucking episodes long. So, like, that's the longest fight in the entire history by a long shot.
Longest fight in anime history, right? Isn't that
I'm pretty sure it is the longest fight in anime history as well, because it's just because really that's one continuous fight. Frieza just goes from fighting one guy to the next, to the next, to the next, and then Goku, and then that fight just keeps on going. Like, there's really not a breakup in that fight. So for, like, almost 30 episodes, they are just straight fighting on and on and on. And I feel like because it's set in the mindset of people that Dragon Ball is a series about fights, and then you have this villain who not only has these fairly arbitrary ties to Goku's history, but because he has the biggest fight in the entire franchise,
and the longest build-up also,
and the longest build-up as well, because, like, no other character gets the kind of, like, the artificial humans get, like, Trunks shows up, builds them up, and then they fight the artificial humans. Cell pops up, no fucking build-up. Majin Buu shows up, no fucking build-up. So like Vegeta and Nappa show up with build-up. But really, though, yeah, no one had build-up like Frieza did. So you had the build-up, and you had the big 30-episode payoff to his big fight. And because of the association between Dragon Ball and it being a shonen action fighting series, like, I think that's what makes people pedestalize Frieza as this top-tier guy, like the best villain of the franchise, because he has that big, massive fight, because he has these ties to Goku's history. But I feel like just as a character overall, he just, even within the context of just Dragon Ball, I feel like he's not necessarily the most interesting, he's not really the most complex, and I do kind of feel, like I said, he's over-pedestalized. You have made me rethink a couple of things about his character that, like, kind of recontextualize how I view Frieza, but, like, and he's probably a little, like, a notch higher than he was before.
Good.
But even though, like, I wanted to bring up, like, other members of his race who are pretty much just him, but different, Kula. Like, you have Kula. He's basically the exact same as Frieza, except he didn't blow up Planet Vegeta. But he also has like that extra layer to his character because he has that whole kind of family honor thing.
Yeah, but that layer wouldn't matter or wouldn't stick out as much if Frieza didn't have it, or if Frieza did have it.
True.
The fact that he has that honor and Frieza doesn't, that's what makes him stand out. Like that, you gotta go back to the source.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you go back to because that's the thing though. But like that's an extra layer that Frieza could have had as a character. You don't see Kula going around just offing his subordinates, like willy-nilly like Frieza does. You don't see like his whole character, his whole thing. It wasn't even to get revenge for Frieza. It was to defend his family's honor, like as a samurai-like mentality. And that to me makes Kula more interesting. And also, Frost. Yeah. Frost. A lot of people want to shit on Frost, but I think Frost is also more interesting to Frieza just because Frost has like this whole...
He's a manipulator.
Yes, he is this big master manipulator, and people want to say like, oh, well, like, why would he do that if he's that powerful? It's just like, well, it's better to be respected than feared. Like, because people will just do shit for you if they respect you and they think you're a hero. And he could get all the praise and adoration he could ever want and be viewed as this hero. Well, really, behind the scenes, he's being the sinister motherfucker that's, manipulating all the chess pieces.
But Frieza doesn't care about any of that. Frieza likes to throw his weight around. Frieza likes to make sure, again, in a polite way, he wants to get what he wants. And that's what I'm saying. They're two different characters. Like, Frieza does not give a fuck about getting adoration. He wants to be feared. He gets off on it. You can tell, like, especially with, like I said, Ryujin Nakao's performance, you can tell he gets off on people being afraid of him. He often mentions it. He plays around with his meat, maybe too much,
Like a 14-year-old boy with a Playboy?
Yeah, like me a couple hours ago. He likes being bad. He enjoys being bad because he has no moral compass. And that's what I love about that character. He has no moral compass. And I like that about him. I know that, again, I'm not going to sit here and blow smoke up your ass and tell you that he's as complex as Nebula from fucking Marvel Comics or Darkseid from DC. That's not the truth at all. But he is a character, and I think he's a well-structured character. I mean, there's a few holes like with his transformations and that, but his actual character, I think, makes sense because I've dealt with people in the real world who are sociopaths, and they're not as... And you just imagine you knowing somebody who's a sociopath, who has no conscience, and yet they have powers where they can destroy planets whenever they want. Like, that's like the worst thing. That is the worst thing, because the reason why we don't destroy things and run amok like animals is because we have a social compass. We have a moral compass, sorry. We have a conscience. We have all that shit. This guy has no conscience. Can you imagine if you took a sociopathic person and gave them the Frieza powers? It would be Frieza.
Right. And I mean, yeah, that is what Frieza is. And I just feel like... I always feel like that's just kind of like a cheap cop-out, though, to just... Like the sociopath thing is just it's so easy to write. It's just so easy to be like, oh yeah, like he is just pure evil to his core. Why? Because fuck it, he's all powerful. Why not be all evil? Like ultimate power corrupts ultimately kind of mentality. And like I said, like I pretty much made all the points that I had, and so at this point, like, do you have any other closing statements?
I will say that I do agree with you that Super has diminished Frieza. I hate that Beerus line. I can't stand it. I think it should have been written a little bit better. They were going to say they knew each other. I think it really did undermine Frieza as a villain. I really think it did. But I still love Frieza. I mean, my favorite character, I guess, villain would be Champa now because he is the anime version of me. And I'm nothing like Frieza. That's one thing I will say. He is my favorite villain, but I'm not anything like him. So, and I think that's why he's my favorite villain. He's so different, So yeah, that's how.
Okay, fair enough. All right. I've pretty much, like I said, like I've already made all my...
Fuck Frieza in this goddamn fandom!
Well, I mean, there's always that, but no, like I said, like I made all my points. Like I said, like I still don't see Frieza as that intricate because I do feel he is really easy to write for and all that stuff. I do see your points that, he is that there are people like that, but, you know, I feel like from a villain standpoint in a piece of fiction, like, just because he's realistic in that regard doesn't necessarily make him that great of a character. But you know what? Like, I made my points, you've made your points. I'm gonna put it over to the listeners. You guys can hash it out in the comments like a bunch of animals. You know, do you agree with me? Do you agree with Geekdom? Or are you somewhere in the middle? Do you think like, no, like Frieza's a good character. He's not a bad character. He's not a great character. He's a good character. Just let us know. You know, maybe if you want to like write a full essay about what you think about Frieza. I'm not going to say I'm going to read it, but I will try to. And, yeah, until next time, guys. Xeon
out.